The films in tonight's double feature shouldn't work together, but they do. Welcome to Amon Presents. This is the space where movie nights become conversations, where cult films, classics, forgotten gems, and unexpected pairings come together not just because they match, but because they speak to each other in ways that reveal something deeper. Sometimes the connection is obvious, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's aesthetic, and sometimes two films made years apart somehow end up finishing each other's sentences. So, let's hop right into a double feature about women on the verge of a nervous breakdown themed Plastic Dreams. This is why I love pairing films. Tonight, we're talking about Mean Girls from 2004, directed by Mark Waters. The plot follows Katie Heron, played by Lindsay Lohan, a naive teenager who transitions from being homeschooled in Africa to navigating the brutal social hierarchy of a typical American public high school. She is quickly drafted into the Plastics, an elite and manipulative clique of popular girls setting off a chaotic chain of high school drama, betrayal, and self discovery. And Mulholland Drive from 2001, directed by David Lynch. Betty Elms, played by Naomi Watts, a clean cut, aspiring actress, arrives in Los Angeles and discovers an amnesiac woman, played by Laura Herring, hiding in her aunt's apartment. They attempt to piece together the woman's identity while intersecting with a film director, played by Justin Theroux, blackmailed by the mob. Now, on paper, these films feel like they belong on completely different planets. One is a razor sharp teen comedy about high school hierarchy and social survival, and the other is a surreal Hollywood nightmare that feels like a dream slowly collapsing in on itself. But underneath both films, they ask the same exact question: what happens when you become the version of yourself the world rewards? Both films are deeply interested in performance, performing femininity, confidence, success, desirability, and eventually losing yourself in that performance. No spoilers, just a prescription perspective before you take this journey. Mean Girls is often remembered as endlessly quotable, and it is. But revisiting it now, what really stands out is how observant and honestly brutal it is about social conditioning. The movie opens with this almost nature like documentary perspective on teenagers, and the imagery isn't accidental. The film is basically saying humans aren't as evolved as we think we are. High school becomes this training ground for hierarchy, a place where young people, especially girls, are taught how power works, who gets chosen, looked at, mocked, and who gets to define what's valuable. And what's fascinating is that this movie understands these rules are inherited. Nobody in this movie is born cruel, they're absorbing a system. Girl World has rules. Girls are encouraged to compete with each other, to criticize themselves constantly, to dim themselves down in order to be accepted. There is a recurring idea in the film where girls are rewarded for pretending not to know things. Don't let a guy know you're smarter than him. And one of the smartest observations the film makes is that the answers are technically right, but spiritually wrong. The system works, but at what cost? Regina George, played by Rachel McAdams, might secretly be one of the saddest characters in mainstream comedy. She is so far gone into insecurity and performance that control is the only thing keeping her identity intact. And the movie understands mean girls aren't monsters, they're products. Products of beauty standards, competition, the sexualization of teenage girls, and being told their worth is external. And this is why I genuinely think this is a feminist film. Not because it presents perfect women, it absolutely doesn't, but it is deeply aware of the machinery surrounding girlhood. And yes, there are some things in the film that feel dated or problematic now, but I think the emotional truth of the film outweighs those aspects because the movie ultimately critiques the very systems it participates in. What also makes the movie brilliant structurally is that Katie and Regina eventually switch roles. Katie enters the story as an outsider observing the madness, then slowly becomes consumed by the exact thing she originally questioned, which feels incredibly human. Because most people don't realize they've changed until they're already living as somebody else. And that idea, becoming somebody else in order to survive or succeed, leads perfectly into Mulholland Drive. Because where Mean Girls turns identity into comedy and satire, Mulholland Drive turns it into horror. From the opening moments of Mulholland Drive, there's a strange juxtaposition of hope and dread. Everything feels bright and dreamlike, but wrong, like a fantasy decaying in real time. And there's something so haunting about watching Laura Herring wander through Los Angeles like a zombie searching for hope. And it feels connected to the mythology of Hollywood. People leaving small towns, leaving old lives, leaving trauma behind because they believe reinvention is possible somewhere else. And David Lynch asks, what if the dream itself is a trap? This movie portrays Hollywood almost like a machine that consumes identity, a cautionary tale. And the lighting in this film is unbelievable. Everything glows in this artificial beauty that somehow makes the darkness underneath feel even worse. It's noir, but strange, almost camp noir. It is camp noir. And if you've seen Twin Peaks, it's something Lynch excels in. I'm actually going through Twin Peaks right now for the first time, and I cannot believe I've ever slept on this show. It's a masterwork. I cannot wait till I get to the film and the Return series. He basically created his own genre. He is one of a kind. He is greatly missed. And the thing that I love about Lynch is that there's always humor in his work, even in the anxiety. Naomi Watts is astonishing in this. Her performance feels emotionally impossible in the best way. She plays innocence, longing, fantasy, heartbreak, desperation, sometimes all at once. And you understand immediately why people are drawn to Betty, because Betty represents a fantasy we all secretly want: to arrive somewhere new and instantly be chosen, to be adored, to be exceptional, to be seen. And then you have Justin Theroux giving exactly the right kind of performance for this world: weird and sexy, detached, slightly absurd. This film constantly feels like satire. A satire on Hollywood and ambition, maybe even a satire on the stories people create to survive trauma. And I also feel this film is more compassionate towards women than people acknowledge. Women take care of each other throughout the film. There's tenderness inside of all the confusion and dread, which is fascinating when paired with Mean Girls, because the relationship between Betty and Rita is the antithesis of the relationship between Regina and Katie. One relationship is built on competition and social dominance, the other is rooted in emotional refuge and longing. But both films are about identity becoming unstable, about people constructing versions of themselves to survive inside. I think a lot of us, even men, can relate to that. That's why this pairing works so beautifully for me. Both films are about transformation, about performance, about pretending, and in both films, characters slowly become other people, or maybe reveal who they already were underneath. And both films ask, what happens when reality becomes less important than perception? What makes these movies endure is they're not cynical without purpose. They both understand how badly people want connection, acceptance, and to be chosen. And that ache is what links these films together emotionally. And if you want to enjoy these with a little pep, I've found signature cocktails that I've included the recipes for in the description below. So if you decide to spend a night with this double feature, I'd love to know what your take is. I've included where to stream these films in the description below. And if you own them like me, enjoy watching them with a fresh perspective. And if you enjoyed hanging out here, feel free to like and subscribe and come back for more movie pairings and conversations. This is Amon Presents, and I'll see you at the next double feature.